Norwich kept that.
With one of the nurses fooling around with him. She was just going off duty and she was only a young kid. And first time I'd seen her, and I said, "Do you like it here?" She says, "Oh, yes." And she'd come on the scooter and she put a helmet on his head. You know, and I said, "That's tight." And I just remembered him like that, you see. And that's how I want to remember him, as he was happy, you know.
George Hall was used to wearing a helmet. He'd been a miner for close on 50 years. A tough job, but despite modern methods, it could never be made really safe.
Well, he was a local man, spent most of his life in and around Pontefract and Featherstone and working between the two collieries, either the Prince of Wales or Acton colliery. He was a very hard man and had been hard throughout his life, very strong man. Even in the last days of his life, when he was in Stanley Royd, he still retained a tremendous grip with his hands. His hands were just like steel, and I, as a boy, used to feel them occasionally and know exactly what they were like.
There used to be a certain time, it had to be in 8 o'clock, no later. Or he wondered where you were. With that loud a voice, he could shout, and I could hear him 2 miles away, you know.
But quite a humorous man as well, and a good sense of humour, if a bit dry.
To him, it wasn't funny. He'd have you howling and laughing, and he could sit and talk for hours and hours, and you'd never get bored. Everything he used to talk about. Poetry, animals, bird lover. They used to call him Linnet Catcher in his younger days. He used to like a bet like his, the old sixpence and bobbing each way and all that sort of thing. He wasn't a heavy gambler, but he did like a bet.
He also worked in Pontefract races occasionally, selling the race cards with his brother, who had a more or less a full-time job there, but used to spend his time there, when he wasn't selling race cards, round the parade ring and trying to listen in on conversations and seeing what the jockeys were doing and seeing if he could notice anything, so that he may pick up a tip from somewhere.
Let's see. About just 2 years after he retired when he was 65. And he just seemed to have retired, and that's it. And he sort of didn't get any interest in anything, really. You know, he thought, well, all he had to do was just sit and smoke pipe, you know, and I didn't realise, you know. And then I went away for a short holiday, and when I come back, I'd left everything prepared for him, because I know he wouldn't cook anything. And when I come back, everything was just left as I had left it. You know, when I came back, he'd had nothing all the week. And then I started realising that there must have been something.
He'd been retired about 5 years from the pit. He was about 70 and began to have quite a bad cough and a dry throat, and complained to the doctor, who kept giving him some cough medicine and some Linctus for his throat, which didn't seem to do any good. And finally I persuaded him to go see a specialist, who took some swabs and decided that he had some sort of throat cancer, which had nothing to do with smoking. It was a cancer of the larynx, and had to go then to Cookridge Hospital in Leeds for some treatment, some radiant treatment.
They kept him in Cookridge, and he wasn't in Cookridge long. I told him when I took him, I said, "Shall I get him undressed?" "Oh, no, leave him," she says. "He'll be all right," sister says. I says, "Well, I think I'd better undress him." She says, "No, leave him." So me and Leslie come home. Leslie took us. And by the time we got home, the phone went, and Georgie was missing, wasn't he? He'd gone down the fire escape. And they were searching for him. Anyway, they caught him. Now, got him before he got to the end of the road. It was a good job. They were in a right stew in Cookridge.
He began to suffer from lapses of memory, and his memory from then on began to fail quicker. His instant recall became negligible. He couldn't even remember what had happened 2 minutes before, although he could tell you what had happened 50 years before. So it was just the part of his brain had suffered that gave you instant recall on the memory side. So that was the first we knew about him getting worse in his memory would be then about 1983. So it was about 71 then, 72.
And did this mean your mother had to sort of take over running the family, the finances and so on?
Yes, in the later years, she always had been the one who sorted out the gas bill and the rates and everything else. She had to take over even more so then, because he couldn't really be left alone at any time, for the fear of switching on gas stoves and walking away and forgetting that he'd switched them on while he went to find matches, and then forgetting that he'd gone to look for matches.
Fire seemed to draw him. He'd throw anything on fire. Or it put kettle on before we got automatic, and he burnt about 3 kettles out. And then he fractured a gas main. Then he set fire to back bedroom. But you see, what he used to do, he used to like his napping afternoon, and he used to use the electric blanket on both beds. He'd turn one on and forget, and then go get into the bed. And of course it was burning all afternoon and all night and all next morning.
That's what we want burnt to death.
So she had to spend all the time with her eyes on him, and even in bed on a night he would sometimes get up very, very early in the morning and go downstairs. And with my mum being partially deaf, she couldn't hear him opening the doors and going out of the house. So it was a constant worry for her that something may happen to him seriously.
She was getting no sleep because it was really a 24-hour-a-day job. You couldn't leave him for I should say, a second.
No.
Her health deteriorated somewhat. You could see her aging day by day with all the worry, and apart from the help which my sister could give her or I could give her, we didn't get any help from anywhere else at all.
Not from the social services?
No, we never heard from the social services.
Wasn't there any way of giving your mother short relief into hospital relief or anything like that?
Yes, we tried that initially through the advice of the doctors, that we would go into local geriatric hospital, and they had him there for a short time, and then realised that they just couldn't watch him, that it was too much even for 2 nurses, that they had to keep someone there with an eye on him all day, constantly. Otherwise, he were away, and he was gone. It was on recommendation of our local doctor that to go somewhere someone could watch him 24 hours a day. It was one step that we didn't want to take initially, but it was a question of whether we should send him into Stanley Royd or keep him at home and let the health of my mother suffer, which we didn't want to do.
It was my mum what we were both frightened about, me and my brother, because every day she was worse. She was getting no sleep, she was tired, she got cold on top of cold, and her nerves were really shattered in finish, and it were either my dad going in, or if not my dad, my mum would have been in.
So eventually we all decided that the best thing for my mother and for him would be that he be moved into Stanley Royd Hospital.
How did you feel about your father going into a mental home?
Terrible. For 3 weeks after he went in, I was full of remorse, wondering if we could have done more for him, or... But when you've got families of your own, and it, like I say, was 24-hour-a-day job. He wanted 24-hour-a-day nursing, because he was getting a bit incontinent. He was weaning himself and different things, you know. He really had to be looked after, just like a baby, in fact. But it was an awful feeling. That pains in my chest ages after. Right full of remorse and crying, you know. We just sat and wondered if we ought to bring him out, but we knew we couldn't, because my mum was that ill. You know, she was getting no sleep. She was in a shocking state.
Well, there was. Everybody feels that when you go into a mental home that it's something that, I don't know, it's got a lot of stigmatism attached to it. But the fact that my mother had worked there years earlier, when they were just married, in fact, helped a little bit, because she knew from first-hand experience that in Stanley Royd that the nurses and the staff were absolutely wonderful and looked after the people who were in there very, very well indeed.
Those nurses were really marvellous with him. They just treated him like a baby, and he was really happy there. I had no regrets after when he got, after they took him in, because they did really care for each one. I've never seen them. We've gone all times during the week and at night, and it's just been the same. He's always been so nice and clean and so well cared for. When his throat got better, he was really marvellous.
He went down to about, I should say, 9 stone in weight with his throat, because he couldn't eat only soft things. And then when they cured his throat, then he started bouncing weight on, because he could eat. He loved sweet things, and he would always eating. They used to take things out at kitchen, didn't they? If it were on his slice of dry bread, they used to be walking about with it, eating it. And his hair come back on after his radium treatment, and he was a picture of health.
He
Got all his colouring back.
And a beautiful skin, and just looked like a baby, his face, right? Rosy cheeks, he had lovely skin.
I used to go up in the lift all right, but coming back I used to be crying. I don't know why. I'm soft really that way, but I never used to like to leave him, you know. And he used to say, come on, I'm coming home with you. Put his arm through, and he used to come up to the door, didn't he?
Yeah.
And then he'd forget where he was, and then he'd wander off.
2 minutes after it forgot.
He forgot.
Forgot we'd been there.
Did that upset you, Winnie, to see him there?
No, not when he started getting better. I knew he was in good hands, and I knew they were good to him and kind to him. So I used to sly out when he wasn't there. I never let him see me go. And I want to go to the toilet, and while I was at the toilet, I used to nip out. I never said goodbye to him. Never. Because I didn't want to upset him, although he would have forgotten 2 minutes after. But I didn't do anything, because I knew he'd forget we'd been there. But he always knew us when we went.
He never cried, did he?
No.
He never cried to come with us.
No, we never.
He just used to bob his arm through yours and, come on, let's go now. And we're going home. But when we did bring him home that time from hospital, this wasn't his home. He didn't know where he was. He wanted to go back home. And I think back home he went down Tamshell, where he was born.
Then, August Bank Holiday, 1984. An ordinary Sunday for most of Wakefield, but not for Stanley Royd's doctors, nurses and patients.
They rung me on the Sunday night, and she said, your father's dangerously ill. And my mum had gone to bed because she'd got flu. And I rung my brother up, and then I rung her back, and she says, well, I don't think there'd be any point in you coming. He's just comfortable. But if you could get next morning, which we did do, we set off about 8:30 and were there for 9.
What did you tell your mother?
I made my mum stay in car when we got to the door, you know. I said, no, don't you come in.
When we came out of the lift onto the first floor, before we even got into the ward, there was a smell in the air, a terrible smell of sickness about the whole place, and you could sense that there was something wrong, and it got progressively worse as you went through the door and into the ward and the recreation area, and we got quite a shock, actually, because normally in the lounge part you would see 30 or 40 men sat round in chairs awaiting the breakfast at that time of the morning, and this time there was only about half a dozen, and all down the ward and in rooms off there were men in beds and blankets all over the floor, and the place was just like a battlefield. And the 2 staff that appeared to be working there that morning were so busy, in fact, that they never even noticed us coming into the ward.
There were patients laid all over, nurses bathing them, in dining room even. There's nowhere else to put them. And we just asked one of ward orderlies where George was, and he showed us the room and left us.
And we walked down till we found my father, who was laid in a bed unconscious. And Jean and I stood by the bed for some time, and Jean held his hand and whispered to him and stroked his brow. And all the while, going on round us, we could see that something was terribly wrong, because every bed was full, and every man in them seemed to be in some sort of distress. There was only a few who could get about. Jean finally gave my father a kiss, and we turned round and walked out of the ward and back down to the car, and that was it. And that was the last time we saw him alive.
My mum said, how is he? And I says, well, you've got to be prepared for worse. I said, I don't think it'll last week. I didn't know what to feel, really, because nobody knew what was happening. They didn't say it was food poisoning, or they couldn't say they catched any sort of bug, or he'd got pneumonia. Nobody knew nothing. Nurses were as wise as what we were. They didn't even know.
This was in the very early stages. In fact, I think my father was about only the third person to die out of the 25 people or 26 people who died during those terrible weeks that followed. So, although it was in its early stages, people were just confined to bed with this sickness. And it didn't really develop until much later, when the staff were suffering from lack of cleaning materials, bed linen, and all the other things that go to keep such a thing at bay. And I heard then that it got very, very bad indeed in the wards.
When did you first hear that there was a salmonella outbreak?
Well, we didn't hear straight away that it was salmonella. That wasn't until it was known nationally through the media. We got to know probably as quick as what we did. But we realised that even on the Monday, the day after, that it was something to do with the food, because somebody had mentioned that there were so many people sick that it was some meal that they'd eaten on the Sunday before that had made them all so terribly ill.
We didn't hear any more. It was police.
No, not while the police come.
Police come on Friday morning, but we didn't hear anything else from hospital. I used to ring up twice a day, and all they said was there was no point in coming, that it was just comfortable, but he was still rather ill. But no, that was the last thing we remember. That was when Friday morning.
And what happened on Friday morning?
Well, me and my mum were ready for going out shopping, and knock came at the door, and it was the police saying that Dad had passed away.
And you and Leslie went to identify your father's body.
Yes, we
What
did.
was that like, please?
Oh, it was horrible. Well, I was thinking, well, I'm a bit soft at crying, but that day we went in, I went to walk towards coffin, and police wouldn't push me away. Why, I don't know. Whether she knew then it was some sort of a poisoning. But his face, I've seen things on television, but not as bad as what he looked. Oh, he looked terrible. I've seen people die before and they've looked happy and in the face. You know, they've looked at peace, but not my dad. You could see pain, excruciating pain on his face then.
Up till then, Jean, my sister, had been very, very strong about the whole affair and taken it very, very well indeed. We identified the body of my father, which was laid there with mouth open, his eyes were open, and he looked as though he must have weighed only about 5 stone in weight, and this had a tremendous effect on my sister at the time. She just absolutely broke down from that minute on, and I led her outside, and she was sobbing very, very heavily, and couldn't do anything with her for about 5 or 10 minutes until we got her back in the car. But she said, oh, well, why didn't they close his eyes, or why didn't they make him look nice? And she was very upset about that.
Well, I just collapsed. I just collapsed and I got to care. I just couldn't comprehend it at all, way he looked. It was frightening, really. Terrible.
Did you and your mother get any support from the hospital chaplain or from the medical social workers?
No, none at all. No, nobody came. In fact, I didn't know they got a chaplain at Stanley Ride. And I think if anything like that, I think they should try and console you, or be there even when you've come out at mortuary, because people's bound to be upset. Leslie was. I don't think he could talk for a few minutes, couldn't I, Les?
Well, I was upset, yes. It's obviously when someone has died and it's the first time you've seen them dead, then it begins to come to you that they are no more. But also, I felt some anger. Had it not been for the fact that I had my sister to console and look after, as it were, I think I would have kicked a bit more of a fuss up at the time. But it was quite an angry feeling which I had. And as I say, had it not been for Sister being upset and trying to help her, I think I would have vented it on someone quite strongly.
We always wished, this is if ever anything happens to me, I want cremating, and I want my ashes scattering on the park, on the racecourse. That was his last wish. So I put a few in the garden, under the rose trees and that, and then we took the others and we scattered them again, the winning post. And that was his only wish.
We all went down one day, that's my mother and my sister and I, and quite a windy day as it happened, but a nice day, and walked down onto the racecourse and did it exactly where he said and wished it to be done. And we said very few words, and the only thing I said as I scattered the ashes round the winning post was, well, at least you've backed a winner now, you're there, first past the post.
I had a happy feeling about
Oh,
it because
right.
I could hear him really saying to me, 3-2 on the field, 3-2 on the field. You know, he used to know all tic-tac signs, you know, all, everything he used to know. And when we went that day, it was like a weight had been lifted up off my shoulders, because I could feel his presence about, you know. I could really see him at back of us clapping, saying, well done, you know.
Well, we've looked back over the events that's over the last year, and as a family again, and we've decided that we really ought to go for the throats of the health authority one way or another, and hopefully even through programs like yours that we can do something about it.
Because really we used to say my dad had more lives than a cat, because 3 or 4 times he's come near to death, and then to have that with his throat, that was a terrible complaint. And then to go in hospital and be poisoned, because that's what it is to me. You don't expect to go in hospital and be poisoned. I was really angry.
When you look back on a man who's spent his working life down the mines in dangerous conditions and survived 2 very near misses down the mine himself, where his person standing next to him had been killed, survived 2 world wars, it has that touch of irony where you look back and think, well, he survived all that and went through all this only to be killed by some microscopic bug which was fed to him on some roast beef while he was being supposedly looked after in hospital.
Everybody will put in blame on one another. They'll blame it poor staff there and nurses, you know, in particular. And we sent them a card and a letter, didn't we, nurses?
Like Christmas.
You know, really trying to tell them where we felt. We wasn't blaming them.
George Hall was just one of those who died during the salmonella food poisoning outbreak in Stanley Royd Hospital. George Hall was old. He was mentally ill and wasn't going to get any better. But he was strong and fit. His family still loved him. So should he have died? His family believed not. 19 people died in Stanley Royd Hospital. But conditions in Stanley Royd are typical of those in large, cash-starved mental institutions where increasing numbers of elderly mentally ill people are dumped. Over the coming months, Getting On will examine the crisis of care for these people whom, when health cuts are made, are the most vulnerable.
I think he'd have been happy to think there's lots going on. I think happy. I'll be happy wherever it is.
This cockroach is in the kitchen of one of London's top teaching hospitals.
This is a monster. It's an enormous grey oriental cockroach or black beetle.
It's being trapped by an investigator carrying out an undercover survey into food poisoning risks. These cockroaches were caught in the kitchen of a hospital near Glasgow. Cockroaches can carry salmonella food poisoning bacteria that may cause fatal illness. 53 people died of food poisoning in hospitals in England and Wales in 1984. Tonight, we report on the national scandal of the filthy conditions in some hospitals and on how easily food poisoning starts.
This is extremely dangerous. Obviously a protein food, 28 to 29 degrees C. Down the center, we actually achieve 37 degrees C, the best possible temperature for germ growth. If you wanted to grow germs, you couldn't do better than they're doing in this kitchen.
Statistical information shows that amongst all the premises in which food poisoning occurs, hospitals regularly are at the top of the list.
Tomorrow, a report is expected to come out on Britain's worst ever hospital outbreak, a salmonella epidemic here at Stanley Royd Mental Hospital in Yorkshire in 1984. 19 people died.
The symptoms were violent vomiting for some patients. The vomit just shoots out of the patient's mouth, with no control of it, and literally covers everything that is surrounding them.
Les Hall is a car salesman from Pontefract. His father, aged 73, was a patient and got the disease.
We went straight into the ward and found him in bed in a very, very poor condition. He looked as though he'd lost a lot of weight. He was unconscious, breathing very heavily, and felt very cold and clammy. Then we were told that he'd died, and would we go and identify the body. He was in absolutely terrible condition. It looked as though he'd been in great pain.
Even labour pains were nothing compared to the violent pains that this particular bug causes.
Roger Matthews is Deputy Chief Environmental Health Officer for Wakefield. That's a local authority officer who inspects hospitals. He emphasises that Stanley Royd was warned about poor hygiene.
There were repeated inspections, and letters were sent over a long period of time from 1977 onwards. The main concern was the drainage which existed within the kitchen. It was in effect an open drainage channel, allowing the ingress of vermin.
Allowing rats and mice to get into the drains?
Not rats and mice, but cockroaches. They are known vectors of infectious diseases, and particularly salmonella.
They can carry food poisoning, Jim?
They can.
We're in a premises very similar to that of a large hospital kitchen.
and we need clean, washable surfaces like these tiles, in good repair like this.
Richard North is a former environmental health officer, now an independent consultant. He explained how food poisoning starts.
Given that there's meat or other food that the bacteria can grow on, and there's temperature for that germ to grow, then they can build up to sufficient numbers to cause illness. But even though food poisoning prevention is all about temperature control, we still need clean premises. We need an almost clinical environment for the food workers themselves in order to foster a hygienic attitude.
He singled out one area for particular attention, the cold room or fridge.
Now, it's not always known that raw meats like this are absolutely crawling with bacteria. Harmful bacteria, especially salmonella, and you must never let them near cooked meats or sensitive products like cream. To avoid cross-contamination, you have to keep the food separate. The sensitive products like this cream, the cooked meats and similar products well away from the raw products.
Separation, North explained, was essential in the period before cooking. It's only cooking which kills bacteria and ensures meat is safe to eat. We asked Richard North to conduct a survey for us into a wide range of hospitals. He was to establish how good or bad food hygiene was, and whether any deficiencies were caused by lack of money or poor discipline among the staff. All the hospitals which North visited have refused us permission to film in them. To see for himself what conditions were really like, he visited them under cover of darkness when most staff were not around. North's tour of inspection began in Scotland at Woody Lee Psychiatric Hospital near Glasgow. He went in with us one evening without asking the hospital's permission. First-hand checks were necessary to acquire direct evidence. It was clear that parts of the kitchen area needed money spending on them.
Here we have a condensation problem. Over the period, it's obviously caused the paint to peel, and in a food packing area, there is a very real danger of contaminated paint, soil paint pieces actually falling into the food trays.
Elsewhere in the kitchen, North took bacteriological samples from a cutting board, a slicer and a mincer. Then he went to the washing up area.
This is pure and simple poor repair. In a normal kitchen, it would be against the hygiene regulations and the building regulations. The drainage is incorrect, it's illegal, it's dripping onto the base of a very poorly surfaced drainage channel with many, many tiles missing. You can see a build-up of scale, scum, and probably from the look of it, quite a bit of fungus. The whole issue isn't at all helped by an accumulation of food debris, bits and bobs of muck.
This is where hygiene is supposed to start, in the washroom. The chefs are coming in off the streets. They're supposed to clean themselves up and prepare themselves for hygienic food handling. And look at the filth. It's disgusting. The sort of grot you find blocking the sink, filth. The whole area is littered with cigarette butts, with mess. The towels are missing, the nail brush is missing. The toilets as well, they're dirty, soiled, and we can see the dirt very, very clearly on the seat itself. Food poisoning reservoir. From here, virtually anything can spread.
North then checked on whether raw and cooked food were kept apart.
This is the cold room, and it's here that a lot of the cross-contamination can occur unless it's watched very carefully. And straight away we see that there's a primary health hazard. We've got cooked meat here, ham, a very dangerous product, a high-risk product, right up against raw meat, which we know from statistics will be salmonella contaminated. Underside here we have a miscellany of products, unwrapped, could be anything. Cooked beef, in fact, again under the raw meat, next to raw gammon steaks from the look of it. Here, more examples of bad practice. Raw sausage meat, again, high chance of salmonella contamination, next to, in fact, on the same shelf as sausage rolls.
During his nighttime visit, North found one cockroach and put down traps to see how wide the infestation was. Next morning, he collected the traps.
Well, with 5 traps here with cockroaches in, that's 5 out of 7 recovered, which is a very, very high proportion. In fact, on this one, we've got 3 separate ages, would indicate to me that that infestation has been current for at least a year. We know that cockroaches can and do spread very dangerous germs by depositing fecal pellets on the food.
That's depositing cockroaches' excreta on the food.
Quite so. This one's a very, very clear example. We can see he's done his business all over the back of the trap. If that got onto the food and a poor unfortunate patient ate it, he could be very, very ill indeed.
We had the scientific samples from Woody Lee analysed. The cutting board was not clean, and the mincer had on it bacteria that might put patients' health at risk. Microbiologist Barry Streeder.
The mincer showed a high total count. There were 1,000 colonies on the plate. We grew Staph aureus and various other organisms.
What is Staph aureus?
Staph aureus is an organism, some strains of which may cause food poisoning.
What are the symptoms of that food poisoning?
Vomiting and diarrhea.
Woody Lee does seem to be in need of money. The board that runs the hospital says they're short of over £8 million this year and have been told to reduce manpower. The local environmental health department say they visited Woody Lee on occasions, but admitted it had not had a full inspection for 8 years. Old buildings don't necessarily mean poor food hygiene. Wallingham Park Psychiatric Hospital near Croydon is 85 years old and needs constant maintenance. But inside it's a showpiece of health service catering and regularly wins hygiene awards. Evidence that commitment and careful supervision can produce good results in difficult circumstances. Nearby Mayday General Hospital is famous for business-style efficiency and streamlined production techniques. No one denies that where plenty of government money is around, morale is high and discipline good. But according to a recent general survey by the Institution of Environmental Health Officers, more than half Britain's hospitals have poor hygiene. The survey found that 607 hospitals, that is 60% of those surveyed, breached the food hygiene regulations. 97 hospitals, that is 10%, had such poor conditions that they warranted prosecution. In fact, under a law so ancient no one knows its origin, government-run hospitals cannot be prosecuted. This so-called Crown immunity loophole has been under fierce and continuing criticism. Our next undercover visit was to Bevendine Hospital near Brighton. Like Stanley Royd, it is for old and mentally ill patients who are particularly vulnerable to food poisoning. As with Woody Lee, the local health authority refused its permission to film conditions at the hospital openly. North's inquiries began where staff start their day.
We're now in the changing rooms where the chefs are supposed to prepare themselves for the hygienic work that they're going to do later. There's no washing facilities, the whole area is untidy.
By not having wash basins in the changing room, the hospital breaches DHSS guidelines.
So we ask, where on earth is the washing facilities?
A long staircase led to a room where, on arrival, the cooks can wash their hands.
The first immediate thing that strikes one is the wall covering. A cheap paint, obviously.
A case for more money here. The DHSS advised commercial restaurants that they should have smooth and washable walls. It doesn't practice what it preaches.
Now, this brings us on to the washing facilities themselves, where props are preventing the ceiling from collapsing over the wash basins. Window frame, dirty, peeling, old paint, rusted fittings, rotting wood with various holes in it. Bring a man in here, tell him to wash his hands, and then put him in a kitchen and tell him to be hygienic. It's a joke.
Then upstairs to make further checks on the kitchen.
This is a commercial range, it's known as a solid top. It's actually very, very easy to clean. The condition shows that it hasn't been properly cleaned for some time.
The law says kitchens must be capable of being kept clean.
This, where over the boilers now in the canopy area, the piping here is totally uncleanable. It's obviously leaking and causing quite severe corrosion to what should be a smooth, grey, matte, galvanised finish. The ventilation itself above it isn't working, we're told.
By law, kitchens should be properly ventilated.
Which means effectively the whole kitchen is unventilated. Temperature climbs far too high as a result.
Then to the all-important refrigerator.
We're in the cold stall now of the hospital. This is the main chill facility where all the high-risk, sensitive foods are kept. We find critical basic mistakes here. We have raw meat storage,
sausages which are known to be highly contaminated. Very often you find salmonella into them, next to the cooked meat, but we find immediately underneath a bowl of possibly cream or milk, cheese. Working down, we find cooked mince in flat trays, readily exposed to contamination. And right at the bottom, on the floor, level with foot level, just where you might kick it or fall over it, is cooked ham, one of the highest risk products we can possibly have, one that if we do get it contaminated, we're almost certain of a food poisoning outbreak. It couldn't be in a worse position if it tried. Here we have canned ham, again a high-risk product, and no pretense at wrapping, straight on the wooden benching, asking for contamination, a real food poisoning risk.
North took a sample from the cold room door handle.
The contact plate from the fridge handle showed 300 colonies on the plate, of which there were some Staph aureus and a variety of other organisms. Staph aureus is an organism, some strains of which may cause food poisoning. It is a possible hazard because somebody going to the fridge, opening it using the handle, may contaminate their hands with the staph.
From the hands, bacteria, he said, might reach food.
And if they were the strains that produce toxin, then a toxin could be produced.
And cause food poisoning?
Yes, and cause food poisoning.
Brighton Health Authority, which runs Bevindine, say they're short of money. Hygiene, they say, is left largely in the hands of environmental health officers. The local officers told us, we cannot say everything is marvellous, but the health authority is doing what it can. Richard North, who's been an environmental health officer, has a sterner view.
If this were a private sector kitchen, there are more than enough defects which, taken as a whole, would warrant prosecution. The test would be whether those defects were long-standing, and should that be the case, I certainly, if I were in the position, would consider taking up prosecution.
North survey...
It's risky.
Pure Cadburyness. Only from Cadbury.
When work's finally over, what will you do? There's the garden, and golf, and painting, and travel. But will your pension be up to it? Perhaps you're a Scottish widow. No, you don't have to be a widow or Scottish to start a pension plan designed for Scottish widows like him, or them. It's high time you asked your financial advisor about Scottish widows. High-performance pensions.
Now there's a new, fun and fitness, hippopotamus yogurt mousse in 4 fruit flavors. So light and yogurty, you've just got to dive in. New hippopotamus yogurt mousse from Shamborsi. Come on, dive in.
Just a little reminder, Wednesday is National No Smoking Day. There is an oil that is continually changing, keeping pace with engine technology, so you can be confident, no matter how hard you drive your car, there is one moving part in your engine that has the future built in. It is Castrol GTX liquid engineering, fitted in your engine.
For warming news on real fires, plus the chance to win a colour TV, pop along to the Real Fire Heating Exhibition, March 8th, 9th and 10th, Merchant Adventurers Hall, Fossgate, York.
Amy faces the Gestapo in the final Wish Me Luck.
While we're sitting here safely, Mattie's...
Now the Gestapo have got her. We're anything but safe.
She's more valuable to us as a prisoner than out in the field. Is that right?
Yes, God help us, that's what I'm saying.
I've got to contact her, Claudine, and I need your help.
I helped you enough last time.
You've had a message from Area 2 about MA. It's the go-ahead.
I'm afraid not. It's do not attempt rescue.
Abandoned by her friends, wish me luck tonight.
Now on Yorkshire Television, the final of the MIM Britannia British Open snooker tournament from Derby.
Yes, the 19-year-old Stephen Henry on the brink of triumph in the MIM Britannia British Open and his second major success of the season.
Mike Hallett.
His luckless stablemate Mike Hallett needs the biggest snooker miracle of all time. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome. Well, the first prize of £60,000 at stake in this, the last session of the final. And after an astonishing assault yesterday, the young Scot has an overnight lead of 12 frames to 2, needing just one more frame for victory. We'll join them in just a moment. But first of all, a visit to Budapest on day 2 of the European Indoor Athletics Championships, and Jim Rosenthal is in Hungary.
Dickie, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon from the Sports Hall in Budapest. Absolutely packed once again for the second and last day of these European Indoor Championships. We've already seen some very encouraging performances from British athletes, and the hope is that yesterday's promise is going to be translated into today's medals. Linford Christie goes in the 200 metres, having already proved that he is still Europe's top sprinter.
The others made a better start, but Christie is used to that. Christie coming on strong, and he's going to have to really go for it here, and he's made it, I think. A very close finish, but Christie gets the gold medal in 6.57. Once again, he had our hearts in our mouths because he left it late, but that superb Christie finish was enough to devastate the opposition yet again.
Well, shortly after that 60 metres triumph, Linford had a very physical heat in the 200 metres. He collided with a West German in the lane outside him, and he knows the 200 is going to be a lot tougher than he originally expected. Now, Britain's never won more than 6 medals in these championships. I feel today we've got a really good chance of taking at least 5. As well as Linford Christie, there's John Ridgeon going over the high hurdles. He's prepared meticulously for these championships. He's been in Budapest for over a week and looked a class apart qualifying for the final. In the 800 metres, watch for Tony Morell running steadily into form. He's trying to shake off an attack of tonsillitis, but Rob Druppers is going to take some catching in that 800 metres. I think Wendy Sly should go pretty well in the women's 3,000 metres too. In the men's 400, the Scot Brian Whittle, a couple of personal bests here, and he's twice beaten the East German world champion. That's Thomas Schoenleber. Sally Gunnell and David Sharp both have the capabilities of getting on the winner's rostrum as well. It could well be quite a day here for Britain, Dickie, and I know you're going to be rejoining us here in Budapest a bit later in the afternoon.
Yes, we certainly look forward to that. Thank you very much indeed, Jim. Athletics later, but it's snooker now and the British Open final. Stephen Henry 12, Mike Hallett 2. Frame 15 now, described by Rex Williams and John Pullman.
15th frame, Stephen Henry to break.
So the first frame of the day, the 15th of the match, and Stephen Henry breaks off. Needing just one more frame for victory in this final. And the man who's going to try and do something about that, Mike Hallett. Well, there's a mistake with his initial stroke. Stephen Henry straight in with a chance.
Mike Hallett has misjudged that kind of shot, trying to drop into the pack on a number of occasions in this match, and it's been quite costly. And this could also be costly.
16. $17. $23. $24.
So 31
31.
points accrued in rather quick time, and still more to come.
32. $39. $39, Stephen Henry.
Well, useful 39 there from Stephen Henry, and didn't expect him to miss that red, but rather fortunate to have got out as well again as he has, and he's played extremely well in this match and throughout the tournament, but Mike really hasn't had any running at all, not in the final, that is. But that's not taking anything away from Stephen Henry, because he has played brilliantly.
Well, Mike Hallett split the reds up with his previous safety stroke, and that may now pay dividends. Must take every opportunity that comes his way.
One.
Well, every chance here for Stephen Henry to finish the match off and take the title.
5.
I would think Mike Hallett will be pleased when it's all over.
$10. $11.
Puts him 50 points in front and still in prime position.
$17. $18. $24. $24, Stephen Henry.
63 points the difference now, still 75 points, possible points that is, on the table. That would be a black with every red and all the colours.
Unfortunately for Mike, the black, pink and blue all reasonably tied up. And he's got to get high colours.
1, Mike Allen.
Nightmare of a match Mike has had. Well, you know what we say, John? When you're playing well, everything runs for you, and everything has run for Stephen Hendry. Everything is just, every little touch has dropped perfectly for him. And I shall be surprised if Mike bothers to come back to the table if Stephen Hendry misses.
Stephen Hendry. One. Eight. Nine. 16.
Well, Mike will be playing the snooker now.
16, Mike Howard. Six. 6. Stephen Henry.
So frame and match conceded, and Stephen Hendry becomes the MIM Britannia British Open champion of 1988.
And naturally a very happy Stephen Hendry. His time, albeit much earlier than initially expected for the presentation, so let me hand over now to MC Steve Conway.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'm sure you're getting a great big round of applause to receive the runners-up prize for £36,000, the runner-up in the MIM Britannia Unit Trust British Open, Mike Hallett. And ladies and gentlemen, here he is now, this talented young man, on a very happy day for him, to receive no less than £60,000 as the first prize, £6,000 for the top break. Here he is, the winner of the MIM Britannia Unit Trust British Open, and to receive the trophy from Lord Ripon, here is the winner, Stephen Hendry. Stephen Hendry, ladies and gentlemen.
So, to the victors, the spoils, and well earned too. We'll take a short break. We can look ahead to athletics, but in just a couple of minutes, I'll be talking to the two finalists. That's next.
Dave, do you ever get homesick?
Yeah. But not much.
Anthony? Oh, congratulations on your exam results.
Grandma, I failed.
You failed? What do you mean you failed?
I mean I failed. Maths, English, physics, geography, German, woodwork, art. I failed.
You didn't pass anything?
Pottery.
Pottery? Very useful. Anthony, people will always need plates. Anything else?
And sociology.
An ology? It gets an ology and it says he's failed. You get an ology, you're a scientist.
Whether it's well done or hard luck, a phone call says a lot.
The most brilliant boys are teachers who are wrong. You know, they can't mark. A lot of them can't see.
British Telecom.